Hey everyone, Nigel and Luke here, and welcome to another edition of Crimes of the Week International. Representatives from Australia's Victoria Police say that the residents of a quiet neighbourhood have been left devastated this week after a kind and elderly grandmother was killed inside of her home and her own daughter was arrested for the crime. The situation began at around 11 a.m. on March 4th when police were called to a house on Holroyd Court in the Melbourne suburb of Blackburn South. They went there after they were contacted by the son of 78-year-old Irene Herzl, who owned the property. The son asked authorities to do a welfare check after receiving a disturbing call from his 47-year-old sister Christine. While the details of that call have not been released at this time, what we do know is what police found when they arrived. Upon entering the home, they discovered Irene's lifeless body. She had been stabbed multiple times. Shortly afterwards, Irene's daughter Christine was arrested for the crime. News of what had happened came as a shocking blow to members of the community, many of whom say that Irene was an integral part of the neighborhood. Though she was mostly quiet and unassuming, she was described as friendly, kind, and caring. She liked to chat with neighbors about gardening and lived a mostly simple life. Though no motive has been confirmed at this time, during a court appearance this week, Christine Herzl's defense lawyer stated that she suffers from schizophrenia. She has now been charged with her mother's murder and remains in custody. Representatives from England's Hampshire Police released a major update in a truly tragic case this week, announcing that they have now charged a local mother with murder nearly a year and a half after her young daughter was discovered in a pond near their family home. The whole case began just after 5 p.m. on September 10th, 2023, when Hampshire Police received a frantic call about a missing girl. They were told that 2-year-old Annabelle Mackey had disappeared from her home on Forge Road in the small village of Kingsley. Shortly after the alarm was sounded about the young girl's disappearance, an awful discovery was made. Annabelle was found unresponsive in the waters of Kingsley Pond, less than 500 yards away from her home. The 2-year-old was rushed to a hospital in critical condition, though sadly, she died the following day. Now, at the time that this originally happened, Annabelle's mother, 42-year-old Alice Mackey, was quickly detained and held under the country's Mental Health Act. However, no charges were laid. Well, that has now changed almost exactly a year and a half later, with police announcing this week that Alice is officially facing murder charges. So far, authorities have remained tight-lipped about the case, and it seems almost no additional details have been released about what led to the charges after all this time. What they have said is that the new arrest and charges, which happened on March 4th, came after they, quote, carried out the investigation into Annabelle's death and her movements before she was located at Kingsley Pond. Following the news, Annabelle's father, David, released a tribute to his daughter in a separate announcement. He wrote in part, quote, Annabelle was a beautiful, positive, and very happy little girl. She had an incredibly pure and caring nature that we miss so much. She loved story time, dogs, and her dolly. She enjoyed singing songs and nursery rhymes and had a very sweet tooth. Annabelle loved to laugh. She brought so much happiness into our lives. She was dearly loved by her family and friends. Thank you to everyone who was a positive influence in her life. Please continue Annabelle's legacy by remembering her and caring for others as much as she did. The world needs more people like Annabelle to spread positivity and kindness. At the time of this recording, Alice Mackey remains in custody. The family members of a 22-year-old Indian political worker are reportedly demanding answers this week after her body was found under grisly circumstances days after she abruptly disappeared from her home. The case began sometime on March 1st when a suspicious black suitcase was found by members of the public near a bus stop in Rohtak district in the state of Haryana. When the bag was investigated further, witnesses realized to their horror that a woman's body was inside. She had been brutally strangled to death. When police were called, it was quickly determined that the remains were those of 22-year-old Himani Narwal. She lived in the area, but had not been seen in several days. The news came as a shock not just to Himani's loved ones, but also to many members of India's political community. The 22-year-old was a well-known worker with the Indian National Congress Party and had spent the last several years of her life deeply involved and committed to their efforts in government. She was described by those that knew her as an ambitious young woman, one who also boasted many thousands of followers on social media. For this reason, it was initially suspected that Himani's involvement in politics may have had something to do with her murder. In fact, family members, including her mother, came out and said as much, telling reporters, quote, "Election and party politics claimed my daughter's life. She made enemies because of that. The perpetrators could be from the party or even her friends." However, 2 days later, authorities announced a much more simple, albeit equally disturbing explanation. They now allege that Himani was killed by a man who she was involved in some kind of relationship with. So far, that man has been identified only by the name Sachin, and the exact nature of their relationship remains under investigation. Most reports refer to Sachin simply as a friend, though according to police, he claimed that they had been romantically involved. Sachin was arrested on March 3rd after chilling CCTV footage emerged of him lugging the black suitcase with Himani's remains inside. In the video, it's believed that he was on his way to dump the 22-year-old's body at the bus stop, where it was later recovered. After being taken into custody, Sachin reportedly confessed to killing Himani during the middle of a heated argument at her home on the evening of February 27th. He stated that the dispute was over money, claiming he had previously given Himani cash and that he had killed her in a rage by strangling her with a charging cable when she demanded more. However, it's unclear if this is the whole story, as Sachin reportedly stole several valuables from Himani's home after her murder, including jewelry, a laptop, and her motorized scooter. Reports also mention that Sachin is a married father of 2, suggesting that there could have been other motives behind the crime. For their part, Himani's family members say that they believe there is more going on, and that they won't stop pushing for answers until they feel like they have received justice. Currently, Sachin remains in custody, and the investigation continues. Authorities in South Korea say that one of their fellow officers is in danger of facing legal consequences after he fatally shot a knife-wielding suspect last week during the middle of a violent attack, despite the fact that experts say the situation was a justifiable case of self-defense. The whole thing began shortly after 3 a.m. on February 26th, when police in the city of Gwangju received an alarming emergency call from a pair of women. The women explained that they were being chased by a strange man who said that he had also been threatening them. 2 officers quickly arrived at the scene, an alleyway in the city's Gumnamro district. However, when they told the male suspect to stop and attempted to speak with him, he pulled a 14-inch knife out of a paper bag he was carrying. The officers repeatedly told the man to drop his weapon. However, he reportedly ignored all of these commands. The junior officer attempted to stop the suspect by deploying a taser, but he missed, instead providing a window for the man to attack. According to reports, even at this point, the officers did not fire lethal rounds. By law, South Korean police are required to have a blank round in their service weapons, which are supposed to be used first to further discourage escalation. In this case, that's apparently what happened. The senior officer fired his blank round. However, it did not deter the suspect. Instead, the man reportedly slashed and stabbed at the officer with his knife, causing injuries to his face and neck. Only then did the senior officer fire 3 live rounds, which hit the suspect in the abdomen and upper body. Local media reports state that after being hit, the suspect still attempted to run, only collapsing after he was finally hit with a taser. He was rushed to a hospital, but he died about an hour later. The senior officer, meanwhile, underwent emergency surgery for his injuries. Despite widespread agreement among South Korean law enforcement experts that the incident is a clear-cut case of self-defense, it appears that the senior officer is still facing significant scrutiny, and experts have warned that it's possible he will face legal penalties due to the incredibly stringent rules and standards that are expected of South Korean officers. These standards state that even in situations like this, officers are required to try and aim their weapons at, quote, the least injurious area, preferably the thigh areas or lower. An expert who spoke with local media told reporters, quote, the officer did not use live bullets immediately. He warned and shot a blank cartridge, and yet the man kept trying to attack the officer while wielding a knife. There seemed to be no other way to stop him. If the officer ends up being penalized for this, I think it would significantly affect the morale of all police officers. Still, reports note a case from 2001 where an officer fatally shot a suspect under similar circumstances. That man was a former wrestler and attacked the police officer during an attempted arrest. While the officer was eventually acquitted of criminal wrongdoing, in 2008, a court ordered him to pay the man's family the equivalent of $68,000 US in compensation. Apparently, this is because legally the government can pass off their responsibility to individual officers, requiring them to handle any associated costs. At the time of this recording, no charges have been brought against either officer involved in last week's shooting. However, the situation is still under investigation. Representatives from Colombia's national police released some quite literally hair-raising footage last week after a would-be smuggler was caught trying to board a plane with a large amount of drugs stashed in an amusing way. According to reports, it all went down on February 20th when the 40-year-old unidentified suspect tried to board a plane at the Rafael Núñez International Airport in the city of Cartagena. The man was planning to head to Amsterdam. However, unfortunately for him, he wouldn't be making his flight. In video released by the National Police, you can see why. As officers removed a toupee from the top of his head, they discovered a large amount of cocaine hidden inside. According to authorities, 19 capsules full of the drug were recovered from under the hairpiece, weighing a total of nearly half a pound. Had the drugs made their way to Europe, it's estimated they would have been worth the equivalent of more than $10,000 US. While it appears the toupee was actually quite well made, and as you can see, officers had to cut it from his head to remove it, fooling the human eye wasn't enough. As soon as the 40-year-old suspect walked through the airport scanners, security officials could tell something was up, and the man's drug-in-a-rug scheme came crashing down. Police say the man was immediately arrested after the discovery, and he already had 2 prior convictions for drug trafficking. Representatives from Japan's Hokkaido Prefectural Police released an announcement in connection with an equally bizarre and revolting case this week, revealing that they had arrested a 58-year-old unemployed man who was accused of putting urine into the soap dispensers of a business last year. The whole thing started sometime in the fall of 2024 when employees at a drugstore in the town of Nakashibetsu began to notice a strange trend. On multiple occasions, the soap in the dispenser of their bathroom became discolored for no apparent reason. Staff members kept an eye on this and kept changing the soap out until the evening of November 18th. That's when one eagle-eyed employee noticed that the soap had changed color yet again, right after a particular customer left the restroom. When questioned, the customer, identified as 58-year-old Kazuyoshi Tateoka, apparently revealed the awful reason why. He had been mixing piss into the soap. Following an investigation, police say that they arrested Tateoka this week, on March 3rd. He apparently was not shy about what he'd done either, telling officers, quote, "I did it to cause trouble for people." While the full reasoning for the 58-year-old's disgusting behavior will likely never be known, it seems that he probably did this several times. He is currently being held on suspicion of fraudulent obstruction of business. Authorities in the Brazilian state of Rio Grande do Sul say that they are investigating a complex and horrifying case this week after a young girl was kidnapped and held captive under terrifying circumstances, and the man allegedly responsible was killed by an angry mob before police could take him into custody. The whole thing began at around 4 p.m. on February 25th, when the victim, a 9-year-old girl from the municipality of Tramandaí, went out to play. While playing in a small open area in the Parque dos Presidentes neighborhood nearby, she vanished. The girl's parents quickly became worried when she didn't return home at the agreed-upon time, and immediately began sounding the alarm. With the help of neighbors and other community members, a desperate search was quickly launched, one that was aided with flyers and a car equipped with a speaker system to make announcements. Though the girl still had not been found by the following morning, attention quickly turned towards a possible suspect, a 61-year-old local convenience store owner named Marco Antonio Boker Yacoa. The 9-year-old victim's father first became suspicious of Yacoa when he went to his store asking if he could check the surveillance footage for possible help tracing his daughter's movements, and he refused. The father also noticed that Yokoa appeared to have an injury to his face and that the music in his business was turned up unusually loud. When police were called and told about all of this, they decided to investigate further, especially given Yokoa's prior history. The 61-year-old had a lengthy and disturbing criminal past that included femicide, drug trafficking, theft, and animal cruelty. Most notably of all, though, he had just finished serving a house arrest sentence the previous month in connection with another kidnapping and false imprisonment case. Sure enough, when officers entered the store and began looking around, they quickly heard the missing 9-year-old victim's terrified screams for help. To their horror, they were coming from a makeshift concrete dungeon that Yokoa had built underneath the back room of the business. The entrance to the area was covered with a trap door and was concealed by crates of beer. Understandably, the first priority of police was getting the young girl to safety. So after removing her from the dungeon, they reunited her with her family and sent her off to a hospital for evaluation. However, during that time, an angry crowd of locals who had heard what was going on began to gather. The group of at least 50 people who had witnessed the girl point to Yokoa as her kidnapper soon turned violent. Though police tried to calm the situation down, they were quickly overwhelmed. The mob destroyed the 61-year-old suspect's car before forcing their way into the business and attacking him directly. By the time officers were able to get things under control, he had been beaten to death. The 9-year-old victim told authorities after her rescue that she had been abducted after Yokoa lured her into his store with a popsicle. Once there, he had trapped her and forced her into the hidden dungeon. The full extent of the young victim's harrowing ordeal currently has not been revealed, so we don't know if she suffered any physical or sexual abuse while she was held captive. However, she reportedly told her parents that Yokoa had deprived her of food and water and had not allowed her to use the bathroom. At the time of this recording, police say that they are still investigating and may bring charges against some of those involved in the deadly mob. However, that currently remains to be seen. The young victim, meanwhile, has returned home to her family. Officials in Germany say that 2 people are dead this week and nearly a dozen other people are injured following a terrifying vehicle ramming attack that took place during the middle of what was supposed to be a fun carnival celebration. The whole thing took place shortly after noon on March 3rd in the city of Mannheim. Large amounts of people were out enjoying ongoing carnivals and other festivities that are held in many places across the country at this time of year in the lead up to the Easter holidays. However, the fun atmosphere was completely shattered at around 12:15 p.m. when a black Ford Fiesta began speeding down Mannheim's busy Planken shopping street. The road, which is meant to be a pedestrian area and which was crowded with people at the time, quickly became the scene of carnage and chaos. Harrowing video shows how the situation began, with the vehicle barreling down the roadway at a high rate of speed. Moments later, the man inside began intentionally driving into unsuspecting people who were unlucky enough not to be able to get to safety in time. More than a dozen people were hit during the rampage, and sadly, 2 of them would later be pronounced dead. While it appears their names have not been released, they have been identified as a 54-year-old man and an 83-year-old woman. At least 11 other people were injured, including a child. Currently, several of the victims are still fighting for their lives in local hospitals. As horrifying as this was, the situation could have been far worse if it weren't for the actions of a brave taxi driver. According to local news sources, upon realizing what was going on, the unidentified hero jumped into his cab and began chasing the suspect, blocking his car several hundred yards down the road. When the suspect was forced to come to a stop, he allegedly got out of his vehicle and shot at the taxi driver. He was not injured, though the reason why is quite strange. Apparently, the attacker's gun was loaded with blanks. Police quickly descended on the scene since they had already been in the area to monitor the celebrations, and were able to arrest the male suspect about half an hour later. Before he could be taken into custody, the man reportedly shot himself in the mouth with his gun. This did apparently cause some injuries, as even guns loaded with blanks can do damage at close range. In the aftermath of the tragedy, the suspect was identified as a 40-year-old German man by the name of Alexander S. Officials have so far stated that they do not believe that Alexander had political or religious motivations for the attack, stating that he had a previously documented history of mental health issues. However, that could still change, especially in light of the most recent evidence that has emerged. According to the latest reports, a piece of paper was found taped to the dashboard of the totaled Ford Fiesta. On it, the 40-year-old had written down, among other things, mathematical calculations for the stopping distance of a car traveling at 50 kilometers per hour. Police have suggested that this could indicate signs of meticulous planning before the attack. On top of this, Alexander S. reportedly has a lengthy criminal history. Among his previous convictions are assault and drunk driving, but also notably hate speech offenses. At the time of the attack, the 40-year-old lived in the neighboring state of Rhineland-Palatinate and was working as a landscape gardener. At the time of this recording, the man remains in custody and he is expected to face multiple charges of murder and attempted murder. The investigation into the exact circumstances and motive leading up to the deadly incident continues. Before we wrap up, we'd like to take a second to give a huge shout out to everyone who has made it this far into the video. Seriously, thank you so much for watching. If you found today's upload interesting and informative, we'd be honored if you'd consider liking and subscribing, as well as hitting the notification bell and selecting all notifications to stay up to date with our latest releases. If you're looking for additional ways to help support the channel, we'd love to have you join us over on Patreon. Patrons get ad-free and early access to all of our content, as well as 4 additional stories per week for each of our Crimes of the Week and Crimes of the Week International videos. You can learn more at patreon.com/crimezone, where you'll also find some of the fine folks whose names are currently on screen. All that being said, we understand that not everyone has the means to support financially, and that's totally okay. We appreciate every like, sub, share, and comment that you send our way. Once again, thanks so much everyone, and take care.